Hi everyone, welcome to today's historical live video. Today we're looking at a very charged topic. Actually, I say that as a pun, but not actually. And that is the great city fires that happened all through, particularly North America, in the 1800s. If you start looking into the history of any city, they had some giant fire that seems to have burned down almost the entire city. Boston, New York, Chicago, St. Louis, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Seattle, Portland, Galveston, Texas. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter. Just pick a city and you're going to have a giant fire. And I came across it when I was researching in my Exposing the Expositions book. And I do have a few, about 6 pages on the fires in here. And it started because the book really started just as a look at the Chicago World's Fair. I didn't realize it would morph into looking at all the fairs of that period. And of course, Chicago had its 1871 fire. And so I had to look into that fire as I was looking into how does the city pretty much burn down, then build a giant exposition 20 years later and allow that to get burned down / torn down, or at the very least, build temporary buildings when you would think if most of the city's burned down, you need buildings. Why wouldn't you build permanent structures then for the fair and you have the buildings that you need? That would be logical. So all of this stuff got me thinking. And it wasn't until I was halfway through the research that on that great stolenhistory.org site, which is now gone, the site creator, Corbin Dallas, KD, as we know, did a great thread called Urban Fire Verdict, Global Attack on Our Civilization or Incompetency. And I'll leave the link below. That some of that thread still exists on that Wayback Machine. It's too bad the whole thing and a lot of the photographs are gone now. But he started that thread with this very clear comment. This could possibly be the biggest cover-up in the history of mankind. At the same time, it could be a case of the most mind-boggling stupidity. And yeah, so how does every city in, we'll say for sure the United States, but Europe and all the other, I mean, they happened in Australia, they happened in New Zealand, they happened everywhere. But we'll just take North America for now, for the sake of this discussion. And first of all, how does every city have a fire like that? You would think after a certain number of fires have broken out in cities all over the country, the other cities would start to think, hey, the likelihood of it happening here is pretty high. We should begin making plans to deal with it. Cities seem to never make plans to deal with it. Secondly, when I'm going to start showing you the photographic evidence that we have of these cities, they do not look like standard fire damage. When I'm going to show you the photos, and we'll just show them to you, I'm just showing you a few randomly as I'm talking here just to whet your appetite. But when I show them to you a little bit later, photo after photo after photo, you're going to begin to see that they all have the same look to them, and the look of just fire does not handle the story. And one of the things that comes in the stories, of course, is that the cities are built of wood. They're all wooden buildings, and that's why they were so easy to burn. But when you look at like this example of Chicago back in the 1950s, from what was the panorama that I'm showing it to you from? The Hessler, right? The Hessler panorama of 1858. These look like solid brick stone buildings. These are the buildings that are burning down and that you're seeing pulverized. When you look at the photos, you don't see a lot of wood around. What you see is a lot of brick and stone virtually melted, and in many cases just sheared and hacked like almost like a knife has gone through them. And it just doesn't look like any sort of fire I've ever recognized, other than, I remember, I'm sorry, I'm a bit rambling a bit on the topic because it's such a huge topic. I remember when I was a kid, I had a book called the Pictorial History of Firefighting. Had it when I was like 6 or 7 years old. Fascinating book, right? Of old pumped water trucks that would be pulled, guys with their handlebar mustaches, the first firemen. And I remember a lot of these photographs were in the book of these early fires. And even at the age of 6 or 7, it came to my mind like, this looks like Hiroshima after an atomic bomb. Like, but I never put two and two together. Like, hey, wait a minute. Am I looking at an atomic bomb or am I looking at a fire kind of thinking? So but it was in my head. It was still there. So all of a sudden, these 45 years later, when I start writing the exposition book and I have to look into these fires, maybe that's still in the back of my mind. That like, what actually are we looking at? And when I went to talk to my building contractor, I showed him, when I was showing him the photos of the fairs and how, and as I said, talked about how that's impossible to build. I happened to show him some of the city fires too. And I remember, this is a guy he's seen a lot of fires, right? He's like one of the top building contractors in this country. So when you need major construction, he's one of the people that get called in. So he's seen lots of big fires, the results of them, because he's the one who has to figure out, how do you rebuild this? What are we going to put here? So he's seen the result. I showed him the photographs. He was clear. I've never seen any fire that looks like this. Because he went through all of the details of how he understands how fire has affected buildings, right? This is an expert. And, where's the scorch damage? There's nothing here that indicates anything's been scorched. Anything has black fire damage. This is pulverized. And so you have to start wondering, what have we been looking at in all of these photographs? Are we looking at just pure incompetence, where the people running the cities didn't know what the hell they were doing and allowed city after city after city to burn to the ground? Or are we looking at the remnants of at least a continent-wide attack on human cities? And I have to lean highly likely that that's what we're looking at. We're not looking at just a fire. We're looking at the result of warfare in some form. Now, I can't prove that because I don't have the video footage of the thing happening, but that seems to be a high possibility. And even when you look at Civil War photographs, the cities look the same. Even though they're claimed to have not been destroyed by fire, they're claimed to have been destroyed either purposely or in some sort of bombardment in the Civil War. And even when you look at the Civil War photographs, like the ones that are coming up on your screen here, do you really think that the supposed cannon material and weapon material of the Civil War could really do that kind of damage? Like, how long would one of those cannons or 10 of those cannons have to stand at a building and reload and constantly put the balls in to take down building after building after building? How much would you need? So I'm just going to read a couple of things from my book about the fires and leave you with then. Actually, let's start with some photographs. That's a good idea. Let's start with more photographs for you. So I'm just leaning in because I'm clicking on my computer to go along. So here's Baltimore, 1904. And again, what's interesting, notice how the telephone poles are fine. The fire has burned the buildings, has burned everything around them, but the telephone poles, or whatever these telegraph wires are, they're fine. Here, this is Toronto in 1904. The city's pulverized. That was San Francisco. Here again, that's I think Baltimore again. This one that's also Baltimore. Here's a photo of San Francisco. This is Galveston, Texas, right? So this is Galveston in 1885, and again, it's amazing to see that literally the brick and the stone have been melted almost to the point of complete pulverization, and the trees in the background are fine. We're looking here at New York's, oh no, this is probably Chicago. We're looking here at 1849. This is St. Louis. Here's some screenshots I just made of the Chicago fire along the way. This one is, I think there's one of Boston in here. Yeah, the Great Fire of Boston. I mean, this looks like Dresden in Germany. And yeah, I know I know what you're going to say. There's a firestorm was created, but the firestorm wasn't just a couple of guys lit some matches to some gasoline cans. I mean, there was thousands of tons of incendiary bombs put on the city in order to create that particular fire in Dresden. But this looks like Dresden, right? This looks like Dresden in 1945. And there's another one, there's that one in Chicago I showed you before. So we have to really ask what went on in these fires. And so I'm just going to read a couple things from the book to help you, because I'm doing this as a very short presentation. I mean, to really do this justice, this should be 2 or 3 hours long and should include mass detail. And I'm kind of hoping, I'm doing this video with the hope that other researchers out there will be really interested in this material, will go start looking, because there's thousands of photos on the internet of these cities, to look at the photos in more detail. Maybe people who have some experience with fire and insurance and what buildings should look like and how buildings get destroyed, and can come and share information, or actually more importantly, actually go take this, what I'm doing, and take it deeper. Go more deeply into what might be happening here, because I think it's extremely important. So I'm talking about the Chicago fire, which happened on October 8, 1871. Again, always claimed to have begun by a wayward cow knocking over a candle, right? Most of these fires have really goofy stories as to how they started. The first thing to realize is that this fire was not in isolation. There were 4 giant fires that day all along Lake Michigan. In Prestigo, Wisconsin, where 2,500 people died, Holland, Michigan, and Manistee, Michigan. 4 great fires on the same day in the same general location is too coincidental. Ignatius Donnelly, author and scientist, suggested in the 1880s that the fires must have been caused by a meteor strike. In 2004, physicist Robert Wood named it Bella's Comet specifically. The story that a running cow could have started this blaze in Chicago is a nice story for kids to believe, like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus, so as to not have to do any real thinking about it. Yet anyone close to Chicago at the time would have seen through the cow story right away, especially with 3 other serious fires close by at the same time. During the Prestigo fire, a local priest was quoted as suggesting that things came from the sky causing the fires, which could mean meteors, but it could mean many things. All he said was things coming from the sky. Because what is for sure, when looking at the photos of above, we're not seeing fires. And the same becomes true when we look at the photos of the other city fires, and even when we look in artwork of the 1500s and 1600s that depict balls of light falling into burning cities, balls that could even look like modern missiles. So what happened? I'll tell you, in here I have the exact quote that my building contractor said to me when he looked at the fire photos. He said, "Who bombed this city? Because this damage is not from a fire. Look, all these buildings were stone, not wood, and the stone is flaking off. That's serious damage. A simple fire cannot do this to stone. Take the cathedral in Paris that just burned down. Yeah, Notre Dame. The ceiling burned because it was made of wood, but the stone structure of the building turned out fine. A bit of soot damage, a bit of change to color, but that's it. Now look at these photos. What has done this to the stone? This really needs to be examined further." So again, go look at these other photos. Portland, Maine, Boston, Toronto. It doesn't matter. The fires look like the brick and stone have been pulverized. We have some more oddities with these fires. The first is one that while they cause tremendous damage, almost no one is claimed to have died in them, like 1 or 2. Would not many have been swept up, especially if it happens at night, caught in the upper floors of buildings, the building collapses on them, maybe a few deaths maybe a few people actually even jump to commit suicide to try to save themselves, but maybe few of the deaths are messages. We also have really odd photos of people posing for selfies, like the day after the photograph, particularly maybe army soldiers or policemen or or city officials, and they're posing almost like the way you would in front of, just after you've won a trophy. Like if you've just won a championship and you take your photo with the trophy, that's how a lot of these pictures look. They're really, really strange. I talked about the Civil War here. The next page. Some in the alternative history research community believe that these fires might have been plasma discharges in some way from the sun, either from the sun or the dome firmament, depending who makes the suggestion. Others see them as deliberately started, perhaps EMP devices, in order to destroy many of the old buildings in the cities or kill off the inhabitants as quickly as possible. It tends me to lead that these fires from the 1800s may have been some form of microwave attack. Because if you put aluminum or aluminum or metal in a microwave and turn it on, it'll quickly catch fire. But if you have broccoli or a carrot next to it, nothing will happen to them other than they'll get a bit wilted and soggy. And this is again what we see in these photos, right? Like this Galveston, Texas. The buildings have been pulverized and burned, but the trees around turned out fine. So what happened here? Was it a fire? Was it a fire, as it was said? Some sort of bombing attack? An EMP or microwave attack that could target buildings, perhaps even specific buildings and areas? A few have even claimed that this is the result of an H.G. Wells real-life War of the Worlds alien attack and takeover of the Earth. I'm not going to say that that's true, but again, since we have no idea what really occurred here, every option has to be kept on the table as possibility. Just to recall, H.G. Wells wrote that story in the 1890s in England, almost at the end of this fire phenomenon, when most of the fires had already been completed, and it's right at the time that all these giant World's Fairs are starting to pop up all over the United States. Again, something in this right away told me that everything about our history, all of our foundation, is in some goofball way linked to these World's Fairs. That these World's Fairs are like a lighthouse, that if we can uncover what the World's Fairs were really doing and what they're telling us, it'll start uncovering answers like this of what really happened with these fires. Another question we have to ask is, just because the photo of a fire says 1871 Chicago or 1889 for Seattle, and that's when we have reports from it, we have to ask, are we sure that's when the fire happened? Because what if the fire happened in 1771 or 1789 and they just changed the date for us? Granted, they would have had to have photography at the time, which is quite possible. We don't know the real history of photography. But because we believe that the history of photography didn't start until 1830, because that narrative is presented to us so strongly, if we see a photograph and someone tries to tell us it's from 1800, instantly the natural result is, but they didn't have photography, so you're wrong. But if that narrative is different, if photography can be pushed back deeper and deeper and deeper into the past, then the dating for a lot of these photographs becomes much more questionable. Again, I'm just throwing that out there. So we may also speculate, one other speculation again, is the fires are listed as being 100 cities over 50 years. So one fire in 1848, one in 1850, two in 1852, two in 1855, two in 1850. I'll put the Wikipedia link below. There's a Wikipedia page that it just lists fires in the 1800s in like North America. It's crazy. But what if that long 100-year period is not wrong? What if the fires really happened over a much shorter period of time? And again, if you change the dates a little bit, say you make all the fires 1860 to 1867. People would be asking a lot more questions of how do 150 major cities all get burned up in 7 years when, sorry, that was years of the Civil War. Let's leave that. Let's leave that in exactly those dates. So exactly those dates, pretend it's the time when the Civil War is supposed to be going on, but cities all over North America that shouldn't have any fighting going on, and that's the time they all are listed as burning down. People would have to start asking questions of like, well, Richmond, Virginia supposedly burns because of the fire. Why does Boston then burn in the same year? That doesn't make any sense. So it's one of these things that perhaps almost presenting a longer period of these makes people not ask more questions, right? Because whatever happened in the 1800s, a time period that I studied it a bit. I went to university as a historian. I found the period quite interesting. But I studied a lot of Native Indian history and a lot of what you might call social history, the birth of city building. But this kind of stuff, this was never taught in my university courses. This was never suggested, like, hey, 100 cities all burned down from a fire, all because they supposedly built wood buildings and didn't have a very good fire department. Okay, that's one theory. But we got others, and we don't know which one is true. Again, I wished I could be bringing you answers for this, and it some way it bugs me. At least I didn't do it like some documentaries. I'm sure you watch them, particularly just these historical documentaries. They start the thing with the answer to whatever is coming is found by these archaeologists, and then, oh, really, they've got the answer. And then they show the 1 hour of them, I don't know, digging somewhere and talking about some statue. And then at the end of the video, at the end of the documentary, they found actually nothing. And so they lied at the start of the documentary, saying they have an answer and they don't. So I'm hopeful that I'm not ever telling you in these videos I've got answers, because I wished I did. All we can start, I think, to do is do something very similar to how Richard Rose talked about how you find truth, which is don't go looking for what you believe, don't go looking for what you want the answer to be, go looking for false. Find in whatever story or whatever you're digging into, be it yourself, spiritual teachings, history, science, it doesn't matter, and find what's false. And as soon as you find something false, you can discard it. Well, that's not true. Look for something else, false, discard it. And eventually, as you discard more and more and more false, what will be left will be the truth, no matter how much you might like it or how nice or awful the truth it might be. It'll be the one thing you can't discard. And these city fires have that element to them that we have to start with, as best as we can, eliminating what's not true. And that all of these cities could have gone through an accidental fire just instantly screams false, particularly, like I say, when these number of building contractors that I know disagreed with this. I really should. The one person I didn't, because it wasn't a main topic of the book, but I should have gone to go and also, before I've done this, maybe I'll do this in the next week or two and I'll do an update to the video, a fire inspector, someone whose actual job is, to determine why a fire started. Go actually find a local fire inspector in this area and sit down with that person, that male or female, whoever has that job, and ask them, would you look at these photographs? Can you tell me what kind of fire this was? And just see what they say. If you're friends with a fire inspector, maybe somebody out there watching the video right now is friends with a fire inspector. This might even save us time. And you could just fire over some internet photographs or have them watch this video and then ask, you've seen all the photos that are in here, what can cause that from the standpoint of fire? How does a fire like that get created? This might help give us some answers, at least to start eliminating options. But going back to the start of Corbin's question, was this some kind of coordinated attack or just stupidity? And I'd have to lean to some sort of coordinated attack. And I'd have to lean then to it's in some way related to what happened to the world before this happened. The world of, I hate to use the term that's floating around the internet now with the big T name. I don't want to use that word, but just a sort of a worldwide, highly advanced civilization that was around in the 16, 17, 1800s that were building these things we now call cathedrals and the buildings that were the World's Fairs. And then all of a sudden seemed to just stop. That the fires are related to this change. So I'm going to leave that there.